have the unenviable spot of being last between you guys and the happy hour. And we will unapologetically take all of that time because we love talking about data, and I bet you do too. So, as I mentioned, we are from Merck, from right over the river there in New Jersey, headquartered in Rahway. If you want to know more, we have a website, so I'm going to skip to it. Now, this is an entire conference talking about AI. It's in the title. And yet we're going to come up here, and we're actually not going to focus on AI today. We'll talk a little bit about what we're doing. But really what we want to talk about is the data, the engine. Because we can see a lot of things, and sometimes we have this, and our business partners have this, where you've got these fancy POCs. You've got these big, shiny sports cars, but they have a hamster wheel for the engine. And so today, what we really want to talk about is the engine that's supporting this, and the engine that we are working in parallel with to make sure that when we have these, because as we heard earlier, the LLM, the agentic, I know there are a lot of buzzwords, but they're allowing us to access some processes, particularly in some of the generative world, that previously we couldn't get our hands on. These are things that are currently done in Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint and others, and it's really unlocking some spaces we haven't been able to get to. But if we don't do it with an underpinning of good data, we're going to end up in a place where, again, we've got fancy with nothing underneath. So I do want to talk a little bit about clinical trials at Merck. So if you saw the earlier slides of what we do, we follow the science. And what that means is we end up with clinical trials that span a wide variety of therapeutic areas. We have primary care, hospital specialty, oncology, vaccines. And within this, we cover all of the modalities: small molecules, peptides, biologics, ADCs. So we have a high degree of complexity underpinning what we support. And in addition, we have a very high volume. So at any given time, we have over 300 early and late stage trials running within our system. So as we build this out, we have to handle both the complexity of being able to handle the nuances, as well as being able to handle the high scale that goes with that. If you look up running a clinical trial and say Wikipedia on the web, you get this very nice, clean, after you go down the phases, and some of you are nodding, you know this world. It looks nice, neat, and tidy on the websites. It doesn't look so pretty on the ground, and from the view of the users, of the people that actually run the processes. Clinical scientists talk to the medical writers talk to the statisticians talk to the clinical scientists. So to support what is a very complicated activity, there are a lot of people that need to come together, and they need to exchange a lot of data and a lot of information to make it happen. As we started on our modernization journey, our systems, if you look way over on the left, looked a lot like that network. Because what happened is we had built up our systems in a way that we had a best of breed. We built our systems out to support each of those nodes in each of those areas. And so you ended up with very, very complicated integrations, and you end up with a lot of siloing. So everyone solved for their little world without necessarily thinking about what it meant for everybody else, leading to a lot of reconciliation, a lot of difficulties in automating. So in 2022, we began our modernization journey, and we're looking at modernizing our entire clinical ecosystem at once. So we early on made the decision to move to a Viva First strategy for our business capability platform. That doesn't cover everything, though. So with that, we also knew that we needed a very solid and very thoughtful data platform to go with that. And what we wanted out of this data platform and the data and analytics platform is not just to support analytics, not just to support the end user and to continue to have that effectively siloing of data, but to also support the transactional side of the process. In clinical trials, you need to move a lot of data and a lot of information to a lot of people. So we wanted to solve for those two things simultaneously as we were doing it. We initially had worked with a partner. We were going to buy a platform. What we found was we could not find a platform that really met our needs. When we start moving into this platform strategy, finding platforms that work together is not always as easy as it seems. And so what we came to very quickly was we really needed to build the platform. And so when we made that decision to build our own, one that met our needs, followed our principles of having certain single sources of truth, certain aspects of the development, it became clear we needed to work with a partner like AWS to help build that out in a very modular way, because we still want a platform that works together. We want a platform by design, but we also want it to be modular and be able to work with the systems that we have and be able to serve our data and our needs. So as we move through, and we're also looking for a data platform that can support this migration. We're moving between a lot of different systems. We'd like this to be relatively easy for our business partners to move through. We need to maintain our data integrity, maintain the systems, and continue this flowing. So we really wanted a data platform that would help support all of that. We've talked a lot today about technology, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that from Gopi on the right-hand side. Some of the things we were particularly looking for is, again, a much more simplified way of moving data and information. As I mentioned, reusable data services. Data integrity is paramount. If you're in clinical, you must have data integrity. And we mean not just when things are going well, but through the migrations. We needed data integrity on our clinical trials while we were moving systems, while we were changing around, while we were migrating, and really moving to a single source of the truth. And when we say that, we mean not just when you're doing analytics, not just at an end user, but at a transactional level, that everybody's looking at the same version of our reality, and everybody's working as an enterprise on that. Now, to get to that, the technology sometimes can be the easy part. It's the parts on the right that can sometimes be a little bit more difficult. And we were fortunate because we had really great support from our business partners in MRL. As we moved from this, best of breed, everyone can do and create whatever they wanted. They could specialize it for themselves and then just pass it on and have somebody else deal with it. We really moved to something where we needed a lot more platform-level governance. We needed to break down that culture of siloed data, and we really needed the entire organization to build out more end-to-end process understanding, because it was no longer the case that you could just wait for things to get to you and just deal with it at the end, and the people at the beginning of the process could do whatever they want. We really needed the entire process to be thinking from the beginning, how does it get all the way to the end? And that was hard. And again, we've been really fortunate that we've had an organization that bought into the data stewardship and really did this in partnership with us. So it's not that we make the technology change and then we work on the change management. These three things with the process are all integrated within it, and we're all on the journey together. So I will share a little bit. We are on the journey. We're not waiting to be done with everything on the data platform to start, experimenting and start moving some of our use cases along. And how we're thinking about this is the data platform, it's not just for analytics. It's not just for Gen AI. We want it to be the all-encompassing, comprehensive data platform that supports all of the activities in our organization. And that means automation, basic meta-driven automation that allows our information and our people to move a little bit faster and focus on things that matter, and getting some of the basic transactional work out of the way. A lot of those are in experimentation, in proof of concept, but starting to head out into being into production. Trial operations insights, being able to do our trials better, having the right information to think about how do we optimize for the patients, how do we optimize to get drugs out faster while not compromising patient safety. Many of these, again, in production, in scale, going through proof of concepts. I think Matt mentioned earlier in the keynote, we are working with generative authoring. We have protocol and CSR drafting in production now, so those are actually scaling out to our entire portfolio. And what this allows us to do is once we have those scaling out, now we're moving quickly to cover the rest of the ECTD. And so having these data platforms, having things allows you to get that quick proof of concept, get them into production, but then move on and start even building out to further and further use cases. We also envision being able to use this for future innovations, for really continuing to push on how do we do modeling, how do we do simulation, how do we do optimization, and doing that collectively as a platform where we're looking at some of the simulation optimization while we are also using it to run our clinical trials and optimize. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gopi. He's going to tell us a little bit about what's underneath. He's going to pop open the hood and show us what's underneath.
Okay. Thank you, Marjorie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me well. So in the last slide, if you look at it, Marjorie highlighted the importance of data. In fact, in a couple of slides before that also, we talked about the importance of the connected data, right? So this is our platform conceptual architecture. Here, we look at data as a product rather than looking at technology or a application. So ultimately, our goal is to have everything as a connected data product available for all our downstream consumption, for insights, or you doing it kind of a AI/ML on top of it to do some discovery. So if you look at this diagram, you will see how data is embedded everywhere in the picture as a core component, not necessarily technology focused, right? So you saw a couple of things, one ingress, one egress, right? Having connected data, having data integrity, right? All of these things which Marjorie talked about boils down to this architecture, and this is what we are trying to build it out as a whole, right? This talks about the data platform, not necessarily the business platforms. Like you saw in the previous slides, we today have a connected, or in fact, what you call it as a best of breed, point-to-point, spaghetti kind of an architecture, which you saw a brief glimpse of in the previous picture from Marjorie. That's all represented here on the left, but in reality, our data platform is kind of a place where you take all the data from across multiple business functions and business domains, bring them to a central place, make the connection, make the enrichments, and whatever needs to be augmented on top of the data to make it usable. So for instance, Marjorie talked about Viva first strategy, Viva as being one of the business platform, but Viva doesn't play everywhere from start to end in a clinical trial ecosystem. They do well with the clinical trial management, they do well with the clinical trial collection, data collection, regulatory, safety, but not necessarily in the analysis and submission space, but also in the space where we need to get the data from external partners, external vendors, and use them in a very meaningful way, making all the connections to make the data really usable. That's where this data platform comes into the equation, where it augments, or it is like equally playing a role of making the data managed in a centralized way, where you or anyone who's consuming the data sees one single source of truth. That's kind of where we went into looking at data platform, and we decided to build it ourselves. Again, in the first slide Marjorie showed about our timelines, we went into the journey of looking at multiple vendors to see whether anyone can meet the space. And anyone in the pharmaceutical space might be facing the same challenge. There's no one single vendor who does everything at this point. They all claim that they can do, but it's in bits and pieces. So we went through an extensive RFP exploration with what is available in the market, and finally we decided, you know what, let's build it. So we built it. Our data platform is completely based on AWS technologies underneath. And then we have some of the components which we'll talk about later. We layered in over on top of it. So from the platform, from the technology perspective, we are ready to get the data into it. What was missing is the data processing services and the platform services you see over there, which doesn't exist. This is where the vendors, many of the vendors claim that they do it well, but upon looking into it, they don't do it completely. They do it in bits and pieces. So that's the part where we started partnering with AWS. And if you recall, how do I go back? If you look at this slide, which Marjorie shared, if you look at this slide, you see this AWS there, where you have all these services. This is what we thought that this is something which the industry lacks. It's done in bits and pieces. So what we did was, okay, let's decide to partner with AWS and started building those things. I just wanted to give that quick background. Then let's go back to the other slide. Okay. So what you see on the data processing services is completely built by AWS in collaborating with us. Our hope is to have this as a service productized from AWS and available for all of the pharmas and life sciences companies to consume it. So I'll quickly talk about what those services are. You all know about medical coding if you are clinically savvy or if you are involved in any clinical space. There is, if you look at the EDC systems and any other systems we have, the medical coding is done in bits and pieces. It's not standardized. I mean, for a while, TMS used to be one of the top medical coding kind of a tool in the market, but it doesn't meet all the needs. It doesn't scale up to the changing CDISC terminologies, leveling, encoding, those type of things, right? So that's one area we found it as a big gap. We thought, okay, let's partner with AWS and start building those. By the way, in the initial, the opening, Marjorie said there is no AI. There's a little bit of AI there. Not in the kinds of pure generative AI. We use large language model to do vectorization so that we can make the search of encoded terms very easily. So there's a little bit of AI involved in there. Then we talk about database lock services. As you all know, when you lock a trial for submission, the process it's involved in getting the trial ready for submission has a lot of steps in it, and it's a huge workflow, right? Huge workflow with a lot of verifications, huge workflow with a lot of milestones. So that's something we thought the industry is lacking. And we also met with few people. They have the same challenges. So we said, okay, let's build it very technology agnostic and have that built on top of any platform you wanted to use to manage your data. So that's another one we are building with AWS. Then masking and blinding services. Of course, in a clinical trial, you know how important it is to have your data masked and blinded. So right now, the way we do it is by putting a lot of restriction on the data at the platform level, managing it very carefully where you move the data. But what we have come up with is basically how do you do that masking and blinding based on a very strong metadata system which we have on top of it, which completely governs and masks the data so that you don't have to be, I mean, of course, masking and blinding, you need to be very careful, but at the same time, avoid the risk of accidentally doing something where you may potentially end up compromising the integrity of the trial. So that's another one we are building with AWS. And the other one, the STTM and STTM generation, which is one of the key pieces, right? Where pretty much a lot of pharmas, or pretty much all the pharmas, struggle with creating that final STTM deliverable packages. So it involves a lot of upfront work, manual work, sometimes writing custom macros, scripts to generate the final deliverables. What we have done there is we have come up with an idea of STTM engine, which is completely metadata driven, which can automate your STTM mapping to an extent where your STTM data is available during FSR. We are even going to an extent saying that every clinical data consumers, the only data product which is available for them to consume is through STTM. I mean, you can ask, my STTM may not be good for operational data. That's why you see there is another thing called ops reports and ops data. It's still available, but our main clinical data, the consumption model is STTM. We are boldly going there saying, okay, let's put STTM up front and make it available from FSR. That would be a standard for every data consumption so that you unify all the consumers into one data standard, one structured way of consuming clinical data. That's kind of another one we are doing. And of course, we are exploring as we move along with the other services. And our intention is to closely collaborate with AWS and see what we can build, not only for Merck, for the industry. By the way, AWS is not a build partner, We are working with them purely in the sense of making it an industry usable service as a co-build rather than a build partner, right? So that's kind of where we are with those services. And again, just to reiterate, up to the point of STTM, we are already in production. We are testing it with few trials. So this year, for us, scaling is the most important thing. So we, as Marjorie mentioned, we have started our journey in 2022. We have done some early adopters. We have started leveraging Viva. We have started leveraging some of these services. This year, our intention is to make sure that these services scale so that all the 100 plus or 200 plus live studies which you are running in production right now will get transitioned into this new platform with Viva and these services on top of it. That's kind of our intention and goal. So this year is a year for us to scale this. So we are in production. This is not a POC. This is production. So some of them are still POC, but up to that 4 services, which is key for our scaling, we are already there. Then you see on the top of it, unified UI. By the way, if you guys get a chance, the demo, which in the first booth, I don't know the number, they are showing, AWS is showing some of the unified UI. That's something we are intending to do, which is basically lets any clinician or a data manager to manage that entire services and the data through one single UI framework. That's what it is. So this is just a few of the highlights. I mean, I can keep on talking about all these things, but this is more platform-centric. In the interest of this is an AWS Life Sciences conference, I'm going to stop with AWS and move on to the next slide. Okay. Here, what I'm going to do is go through each and everything, and you are not allowed to leave this place unless I finish this. I'm just kidding. You might have seen a glimpse of this in Matt's keynote, right? Just to give you some flavor, when we said best of the breed, this is the best of the breed. And this too is the best of the breed, very specific to data collection. It doesn't show your CTMS, it doesn't show your safety and all. It just shows you a glimpse of data collection. And all the things which we do today with different inform versions. By the way, we are an Oracle shop right now. All of a majority of our study runs in Oracle. Oracle in the sense Oracle Inform. We are not Clean One yet, Oracle Inform. And all of these versions of Oracle, versions of DMW, and all those things, if you guys are familiar with, this many places we have to go to do encoding, to do masking, to do database logs, to do STTM mapping. So many areas, right? We are trying to align this to that 3 areas. One is primarily the data processing service areas. So the left-hand side is the current state, and this is where we are transitioning and scaling up to. That's on the right-hand side. So this just highlights or shows you how complicated our ecosystem is and how we are planning to streamline it and put data in the forefront, not the systems and the technologies in the forefront. That's kind of our shift and a pivot. Technology still is very important, but I think the mindset from all of us, including our business partners, has shifted into not speak in terms of technologies, speaks in terms of data. That's kind of where we are heading at. Okay? And then this is kind of our current state of how many trials we run, how many areas we really look at, what are the disease areas we look at. I mean, of course, you know, we have been committed for 35 years in HIV research, more than 1,000 clinical trials involving cancer medicines, 60 years of helping people living with cardiovascular disease. So this is kind of our glimpse into what we do today in our clinical space. In order to scale and support this, obviously you can imagine the technology and the things we need to bring it together to make this thing happen. And that's exactly where we are heading with our transformation. With that, I think we are good.